Okay, Ralph. Well, today's the day. Um, so just to recap, this is your father's watch, and he was wearing this when he was involved in a motorcycle accident in the 1970s. And the watch stopped that day. The watch lost its bezel and crystal, and the dial was damaged. But we found after it got here and I was able to free up the bent hands because all the hands got smashed down, that the movement is actually entirely intact. It's a runner. So we can see it there. Even doing that, pushing over midnight, it starts running again. And this is still power from. That was a little bit of power from the movement of the watch when it was on your father's wrist. So today's the day. This is going to be real interesting. The sealing surface around here. This is the outside surface is where the bezel snaps on, and that seems like that's pretty okay. A lot of this push and abrasion right here, where the metal got pushed in, that's inside the sealing surface. That's the original seal, and that needs to sit in there. So I'm going to have to clean this up. I think the majority of the work that I'm going to have to deal with is going to be trying to make this case okay again. Not only so that the crystal will sit down, so everything's clean. There's nothing like in the way of this. I think functionally the movement's probably going to be fine. Just judging by what I know about how these tend to wear, we're probably looking at a lower mainspring arbor port, just because that's real typical for these. So I'm also going to look through all of my bezels, all of my original bezels. I don't have any that are new old stock, but I do have some. Well, actually, that's not true. I may have one. I'll have to look at it. But I think a lot of it, and the only thing that's going to be unforeseen is the labor needed to basically clean this up. The movement should be pretty straightforward because it's still running. You're missing one end link. That thing snapped, but I have replacement original end links, so we'll get you one of those. Cases, and besides the damage from the wreck, the case is actually in pretty good condition. I'm just going to clean it. I'm not going to try to touch it up or get rid of any of these cosmetic marks here. I'm not going to do anything with that. We're just going to return it. The only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to firm up and repair this original loom here, but I think the rest of the loom is just fine. There's going to be some repair on that hand is still bent. There's going to be some repair on I'm going to clean up the loom, but I'm not going to do anything else to it. I just have to straighten the hands. Still, a little more. Okay, well, today's the day. Well, first update. Your father was an active man. We can see that because we have this brassing right here. That's from the winding weight moving around a little bit, flopping around and hitting this edge as it does. But we can also see that he was active because something I don't see very often, but all of these back screws are loose. See that? That bridge is loose. This entire train bridge is loose. These screws are just, and that usually happens when somebody's really, really, really active in combination with a watch not getting torqued down all the way. It happens sometimes. Usually if I see one loose screw, I'm going to see a bunch of them, and that's what I see here. Also, interestingly, on the case back, inside the case back, it's got this big honking mark in it. And I don't know what that would be from. There's no damage on the movement. I don't know what would have caused this. It almost looks like a manufacturing error. But it's pretty deep. It's only cosmetic. It's not functional, but it's not from the wreck. It's very interesting. So far, nothing funky. The movement's relatively clean. Most of the screws inside were loose. You can see the upper, hang on just 1 second. You can see this is the upper end of the mainspring arbor. That's the upper mainspring arbor bushing. That black stuff is the old mainspring grease working its way out and up here. And that stuff's pretty nasty. And So we'll clean that out. But so far, I mean, it's a little hazy, but so far we're looking okay. And it still had some power left in the mainspring. That's wound down now, so we're gonna keep going already. Okay, so we've got, here's gonna be our first challenge related to the wreck. You can see this right here. Okay, hang on. Let's see where my hand is. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so this right here, this thing is that is your chronograph wheel. That's the heart of the watch. Everything is built around that. It is, this is what the main chronograph sweep hand sits on. If you'll notice, the tip of it, the pinion, it's bent. It's sort of bananaed over there. So we are gonna have to, I'm gonna have to be very careful about straightening that, because this material is actually pretty brittle. It's not ductile at all. It wants to stay pretty firm. So I'm gonna have to try to straighten that without damaging it in any way. Because if while correcting that bend, that right there, if that snaps off, then this is functionally useless and there's no way to repair it. I'll be as careful as I can be, but you never know. It's always twitchy to deal with this kind of stuff. So that's a question mark. We'll have to see how that does. Okay, so there's the lower mainspring arbor port. You can see that ringette crock around it right there. And you can see that it is ovaled out from your perspective down to around the, I don't know, the bottom left. So, you know, it's the usual thing. Yeah, he was active and your lower mainspring arbor port is worn. So we're gonna machine that out and install a jewel. And so that'll be a permanent fix there. Okay, onward. Sorry for all the noise in the background. I have ventilation going and also my parts dryer. Anyway, there's your main plate. There's the new jewel, and that's all cleaned up. You can see all this nice stuff. I've started assembling this material right in here. That's your winding pinion, your stem and everything. Haven't put on a new seal yet, but anyway, cruising along. I've started working on the case. It's gonna take a lot more work, but I'm making progress. Okay, so I did find one bad part, just so you know. This is the second generation style date driving wheel. It's this thing, it gets pushed around, and this bit here pushes over the day wheel, which normally sits right here. The first generations were metal like this, and then Seiko went to plastic by the time this watch was made, and so this is all warped up, and so it was getting all caught up and not working. So I put in one of the older style ones right here, and those obviously do not work. Okay, thank you. Well, unfortunately, your chronograph wheel pinion did not make it through the cleaning process. I was worried about that bend, and it did snap off. You can, trying to get us to focus in here, come on. You can actually, Lord. You can see the sort of the rough gray metal there. About half of the portion that binds with the hand is gone. This is a new old stock wheel, and this is what we're going to need to use. I could in theory use this one, but it'd be a gamble, because you wouldn't have a whole lot of material holding on that hand, and it could just come spinning off. It's really unfortunate because the rest of the chronograph wheel is actually fine, but that missing tip right there, you know, because they make these pinions, they're not ductile at all. They're pretty stiff and they will snap. They don't take kindly to being bent at all. So unfortunately, we're going to have to replace your chronograph wheel. I am so sorry. I was so happy that part lived, and you know, it is what it is. Okay, well, sorry for the bad news, but hey, good news. At least I have a replacement. Okay. So it's running in. There it is. So I tried an experiment, actually, that I'll tell you about in a little bit, but I'm working on trying to save the original chronograph wheel. It just broke my heart to have to replace something that was functionally 100%. So I did some really sort of fine detail work to be able to see if I can seat that sweep hand down a little deeper and get it to grip. So we're going to try that because the number, I just didn't want to swap that out if I didn't have to. We're still in adjustment on this. It's still just running in. I haven't started it. It wasn't too long ago. The thing I'm working on now, all that's running in, is the case. So I have a lot of the smashed over material is removed, and now I am very carefully with a very old and very fine machine file working on cleaning up this outer edge. I've already re-flattened the top with Japanese waterstone grinding, and I am working to get this outer ring decent. The inside came out better than I thought it was going to. So that's real good news, because if we can get that to the point that we have a nice flat interior, we'll have a better chance of the seals being more effective. Not that this watch should ever go near water ever again, but we want it to be as functional as we can make it. Okay. So there it is, alive again. As I expected, the hardest thing to do was to get this case back to the state where it would drop on a bezel again. But it did. It worked out really smoothly. It worked out really well. And now when I dropped on the bezel, it felt to me like nothing had happened, like it snapped on properly. The internal sealing surfaces straightened up a lot better than I thought, because how I worked with that is I have a staking tool, and think of it as a tiny little anvil and press together, and I was able to use it with a little teeny tiny jeweler's hammer. I was able to get that metal to stand back up again, a lot of it, and then I took off the excess and the warp, and then again I took down the face like so with my Japanese water stones, which is kind of like a grinding stone. I use it for like sharpening planes and knife blades and things like that. I cleaned the dial. This is all your original hand loom. You remember the minute hand loom here was cracked out. I harvested some original vintage Seiko loom, genuine Seiko loom, and I reliquefied it, and I applied it to the back of both of the hour and the minute hands, so that the color matches perfectly and the glow is exactly the same. I don't do that very often, but for certain watches I will. I had a whole bunch of different bezels to choose from. Some were more worn than others in different ways. Some had been faded, so they were a light blue. Some had different sorts of wear on them. This one I ended up choosing for a couple of reasons. One, it still was relatively unfaded in color. Nice dark red, nice deep blue. And while it has wear on it, definitely, the wear is consistent and it's not glaring, and it matches the dial. And that's really what I wanted to have it look like. That's the original N-Link that was here in this place. Here's the new old stock. That's the new N-Link there. This link here is backwards. Your father resized this thing at some point, and he flipped it so the seam was up. It was like this when he had it. When it came here, I left that. There's no difference. He did that, so I left it. There's no reason to move it. So that's why that looks like that. I left the bumps and the lumps and the stuff and everything else like that. So there it is. It's alive again. Now with this, oh gosh, I forgot about the most important part. The chronograph wheel. I was able to save your chronograph wheel. Granted, it was a little shorter, but what I did is I very carefully, using some jeweler's lathe, I took down the shaft, because the way these things are worked is that pinion that you saw that was broken, they're keyed. The one side of it is flat. And that's so that when you press the hand tube onto it, the tube deforms and holds to the pinion. So what I did, a lot of that flat section had broken away. So what I did is using basically jeweler's tools, I went and I extended that flat section down. I machined off another little section further down, and I was able to, there was enough room that I was able to sink the hand on, and it is holding. What I would suggest though is to be ginger with it. When you do resets, when you stop it, and reset it, don't do it when the hand is down here. Try to reset really when the hand is right up here, right at the top. You just don't want to. The hand is set and it's working, but you just, trust in God, but tie your horse. Don't let this thing. Don't put this thing hardcore to the test. I mean, you can certainly use the chronograph; it absolutely works, but just wait until it's like around this time, right about there, and then there you go, and you can see it's right on the mark. So that's the way we do it. The hands, the minute hand was especially pretty beaten up, pretty warped. I've corrected a lot of that warp, but you'll still see it a little bit. But the hand clearances are fine. It's all your original loom, and that's about it. What a privilege to see. Thank you so much for sending this in, and thank you for your patience. I'm glad I was able to save your chronograph wheel. I really wanted to do that, because there was no earthly reason beyond that little tip missing for us to swap it out, and they're so rare and so expensive to replace. And I'm glad I was able to work this case back down to the point that the bezel would snap on, and not just kind of snap on, it really is nicely, perfectly snapped on. It's a firm hold, and it's all the way snug down to where it should be. I did take off a few little burrs right here, because this one was kind of sharp where it hit the road, but that one's cleaned up now. All right, that's just about it. I thank you so much, and I really do look forward to this watch coming back to you. Thank you so much.